I want to start with a basic definition, and this definition is going to carry us through the remainder of the module. And it looks like this. This is really the crux of it, making a network resource unavailable. Now, there are many different ways to make that network resource unavailable, and that's really the point of this module. We're going to go through and look at a number of different exploits that can be used by attackers to make sure that the victims can't access the web application that's being targeted. To begin with though, I'd like to quickly touch on a couple of different types of denial of service attack. These are a couple of very broad categories: targeted at an individual and targeted at an entire service. Now let me explain these two more clearly. So firstly, when we're talking about targeting at an individual, we're talking about attempting to disrupt just a single user. Now inevitably, for an attack of this type, it is very specifically targeted. There is something about this individual that's causing the attacker to single them out. So for example, perhaps the victim of an attack is an opponent in a gaming system, and the attacker wants to knock them offline so that they can't compete against them. Or another scenario could be that the victim is bidding in an auction, and the attacker is also bidding, and they want to remove the competition by denying the victim's service and making the auction site unavailable specifically to them. Now, what tends to happen on these very individually targeted attacks is there's an exploit in something such as a password reset or a login feature. And I'm going to talk more about both of those as we proceed through the module. You may also find a distributed denial of service or DDoS attack against an individual. I mentioned gaming just before, and we've actually seen this attack quite frequently where an adversary mounts a distributed denial of service attack against the target's IP address, so floods their network with malicious traffic such that they can't play the game. That may sound a little bit insignificant, but inevitably some people take their gaming very seriously. Now moving on to the attacks that target an entire service. Really what we're talking about here is trying to take the whole thing offline. And these are often the attacks that we do see hitting the news headlines, because it can result in the web application being taken offline for everyone. This is not about trying to knock one person offline or deny access to a service just for one person. It's often about causing maximum impact, making everything unavailable to everyone. Now, for that style of attack, we do frequently see it as a distributed denial of service attack. And I'm going to talk about a couple of different ways that DDoS attacks can be mounted. One of those ways that we'll look at more closely a little bit later on is using a dedicated DDoS service to take the web application offline. And yes, such a thing does exist. DDoS as a service. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of that later on in this module. For now though, let's move on and take a look at a specific example of locking one individual out of a web application and denying them service.